Okay, so I have officially switched over to Davinci Resolve for all my video editing stuff. And I don't switch very often. I started off on Premiere way back in the day, and then went to Final Cut 7. Eventually came back to Premiere because Premiere was really good at just editing H.264 natively. Been here for like a decade. Now I've got a bunch of questions from you guys, so I'm gonna read them off this Asus 14-inch ZenBook. So thank you to Asus and Intel for sponsoring this episode. But check it out, the second display is super cool though. Like as you open the laptop, it lifts up, gives you a little angle so that you can see it better and improves airflow. Pretty sick. So Harrison Mitchell says, why did you decide to switch over to Resolve? Color grading is definitely the biggest one. There's also cloud collaboration, which sounded really cool. There's also the price. There's no subscription fee, so that's nice on the wallet. Oscar asks, what has been your limitations compared to Premiere? Biggest thing I noticed is when you try to sync up clips with audio, you know, you got two cameras that sound similar, you can sync it in Premiere, and Premiere was really good at that. In DaVinci Resolve, it's not as good. It's not as consistent. It works pretty often, but not as often as it used to work with Premiere. I also feel like if you move the video clips around on your hard drives, Premiere was really good at just identifying that you moved files somewhere and relink it a lot of times without you having to do anything. Resolve, I've had a few difficulties relinking clips if you move files around on hard drives. So after I import the video clips into Resolve, I just try to never move anything. David says, how easy was the transfer? Really been procrastinating the switch, but have only heard great stuff. It was not easy to do the switch, to be honest. Not because it's a hard software to learn at all. It's just that I've spent over a decade fine-tuning my workflow for Premiere to work for my needs. So switching all that over, I mean, for the most part, fundamentally everything's the same, but it's like 1,000 tools that are slightly different that you have to relearn. John says, please do a basic tutorial for it. I can go and force teach Carrie some stuff and you guys can come along. You ready? So when you first open up Resolve, you go straight here to the project manager, and this is where all your projects live. And this is already a little bit different from what I'm used to. The project was a file on your computer, so you would open up that file and then it would load up that project. But here it's in Resolve, in their own little database. So let's go ahead and create a new project. One of the things that's unique about Resolve is that there's 7 different workspaces down here that you could switch between. Like color is actually one of the main reasons why I'm switching over to Resolve. So like a lot of the big studios edit in like Avid, and then you have Premiere, a lot of agencies use that, and then there's Final Cut. But they all round trip the project through Resolve to do some professional level color grading. So what's nice is whenever I'm going back and forth between color grading and editing, I don't have to do this whole conversion and round trip back. I just literally edit right here, hop over to color, grade a little bit, hop back into the editing. But for someone that's just starting out, it could be a little bit overwhelming. So we can literally just do everything right here in the edit page, bringing in the footage to cutting it to exporting it out. Up here, we have different windows that we can pop up. So right now is the media pool. We have effects and different things. And what's kind of nice is that it all locks into place. With Premiere, like everything's customizable. You can put them in different spots, but at a point it gets messy and complicated. So I actually really like that everything's just pretty much fixed in place.
I like consistency, so
yeah,
that's good.
So first things first, we got to get the footage into Resolve by inviting them to the media pool party. Now, before you start any project, there's 2 things you really need to know, which is resolution and frame rate of your project or your delivery. And in a lot of cases, you want it to match whatever your footage is. So I could always hit this right here, those 3 little dots, and this is going to show me the resolution and frame rate of this footage that we just shot on the phone. So we're going to go ahead and hit that cog on the bottom right. That's going to show us our project settings.
And then this one, 3840, 2160.
Yep, and timeline frame rate is correct. So we're going to go ahead and highlight all those clips, right click and hit create new timeline using selected clips. So a timeline is basically a series of clips, right?
Okay.
And then a project can have a bunch of different timelines. So sometimes I like to have timeline per scene, and then at the end I just bash them together. Or you can just have one big ass timeline. And see how it says use project settings? That basically means it's going to match the resolution and frame rate that we already set. So yeah, that's right, hit create. Now each timeline can be different from the project. If you need different resolutions, like maybe you're doing like an Instagram vertical video delivery, then you would change that. So there's 3 tools that you're constantly gonna be using in editing. Spacebar, which is going to play the footage. So by default, A is for arrow, B is for blade. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a cut right there, and I can use the arrow key to select it, delete it. And then we come to the end here, and this time I just wanna be able to pull this in, and that works the same way pretty much. Another thing that you always do in Premiere is Command S, no matter what, you're just constantly saving, because when it crashes, you don't want to lose your work. But here, if we go into our preferences, we go to User and project save and load. Live save should be checked off by default, meaning it saves as you go.
Kind of like Google Docs.
Yeah. People say Premiere crashes all the time and Resolve never crashes. In my experience, they both crash, but it's not catastrophic when Resolve crashes because I'm never losing any work.
So the live save is literally a lifesaver.
So Carrie went ahead and just trimmed out all these clips. Now to close everything down, go to edit and delete gaps, and it will go ahead and bunch everything together. So now you have a sequence.
Oh my gosh, this is the first time I ever edited anything.
Yeah, now there's a bunch of different ways to edit. So if I come over to here, I can see my timeline here, but this is my source footage. So I could go ahead and set some in and out points for the clip, and then I can go ahead and do append to end right here, which will just basically throw the clip at the very end of the timeline right there. But you could also do place on top.
Oh, so this would probably be good for when you're trying to do B-roll.
All the things you could do is see this transform right here. If I click that, I can actually take it and make it smaller and see how underneath it you can see this layer. Or if you want to just like go do, if you want to do like a punch in like that.
Punch in on Peter's butthole.
One of the things that I like to use a lot in my workflows is to color code certain clips. Like teal is usually like the shots that I really like. So I actually have different colors assigned to different numbers, so I could do this quick, but just to show you, go select clip with clip color teal. So I copy it, make a new timeline called selects only, paste it here, and then I can go ahead and close my gaps. So delete gaps is something that I definitely put into my keyboard shortcuts, but depending on which tools you use the most, you put it into keys. Like one of the big shortcuts from Premiere is Q and W. So like Q would delete everything before this and close that gap. And then there's W that will do the opposite, where it'll cut everything afterwards and close that gap. So being able to customize out your keyboard is definitely something that helps lessen the blow of switching to a new software. Now, usually you have to do at least some adjustments to audio levels, like how loud is it? So you can go ahead and hold down Shift, and if you scroll, you can make the video track bigger or smaller, and same with the audio. And here we can go ahead and raise some audio levels of this track. So you just hit this bar and you raise it. And what's really cool about Resolve, which I didn't have before, is that you can live see the waveforms change. Right? Before, I couldn't see how big the waveforms are. Bigger, the louder.
Sounds like that saves you some time.
Yeah, definitely. Like this is one of those small features that I'm like, I love this.
You're trying to raise my voice because I don't talk as loud as you.
Exactly. Usually you're talking, you're like this, and then I come in, I'm like really loud. So you can hold down Alt and I can hit some keyframes right here. So this is basically how you adjust levels over time, right? So you start loud here and I can dip down here, but just being able to visually see that helps a ton. Now you're done with your masterpiece. You want to deliver it now. There's gonna go to File and Quick Export. And there's some presets right here. Let's say we're uploading to YouTube, just hit export.
This is the part you're always excited about.
Yeah, rendering is the best part.
This actually isn't as hard as I initially thought it would be. Just gonna be in here like, I'm gonna have a few more screens.
I know, right?
And then when you come in and it'll be like, get out!
All right, I've got a tiny bit of light left, so I'm gonna read a few comments. Thomas says, did it ever crash? And if so, how many times? I kind of lost track of how many times it crashed, but like I said, it just kind of continues off where you left off because of that live save, so it's never been a big deal. Cinematographer says, who painted the Mona Lisa? Pretty sure that was Leonardo DiCaprio, right? The guy from Titanic. Maddie asks if it was worth it to switch over to Resolve, and it was definitely an investment of time to switch everything over. But my hope is that over time, it will make up for it. And then eventually I'll look back and be like, oh, I'm so glad I made that switch. I hope. I'll let you know in like a year or so. Watch, right after I post this video, Premiere is gonna just like implement a huge update. Do you see a change in the professional world from Premiere to Davinci? I say we do a little field trip to IMM Creative, a post facility for people that are more legit than I am. So let's go.
So this is the picture side of IMM Creative. We actually have 3 facilities. So we have the sound side, Foley Stage in Sun Valley, and this is our picture and editorial.
So whenever Eric's not fiddling with cameras, this is his
This is where I am when I'm not fiddling with cameras. Don't push that button, Gene. This is just power. Well, this one, 800 amps. Oh. Billion gigawatts in here. We might be able to go back to the future.
Yeah. 1980s called and they want their phone system back.
Yeah, they do. Basically where I live.
Nice.
Yeah, you got
My Netflix login. Don't look at waveform, signal, vector scope, everything here. I highly recommend this panel. For the money, you get not just the balls, which are important.
Super important.
To have, no.
I just said balls are important for grading.
Okay, so it has a lot of functional buttons, which I think are really good hotkeys, like previous clip, previous frame, previous node, play, stop.
You guys cut in Resolve here?
Well, okay, so we have our first feature that we're doing right now that's been fully cut and delivered in Resolve. This show was cut in Resolve, so rendered in Unreal and then finished and delivered out of Resolve to Netflix. But a lot of times it'll be cut in Avid and then brought into Resolve for finishing. Some of the cool functions I like with Resolve, so like if I'm grading, you know, we use stills a lot, so I grab a still, so like this is my color grade right here, right? A screenshot in Resolve is actually hiding all of your color grade nodes. I can apply all of the color to another scene or even all the keyframes.
And
so
you could
like
just
that's
hit
my
that
most
right
used.
there. Yeah.
This button and this button are my two most used buttons.
Primary.
Or maybe this one, yeah. So primaries gets me back, and I tend to go like this, so, but it gets me back to my lift gamma gain primaries. So the first thing we want to do before we mess with the scene is Control Y. So that creates a new version of a grade. So like if I want to just like mess with this right now and make it all terrible, I can just pop back over here to the version we started with. Boom. But normally what I would do is my first node would be color temperature. So I would find the color temp of the scene. And then my second node would be what would be contrast. The reason is that if I do contrast first, that's gonna affect the color
and
temperature.
it's harder to shift the...
It's harder to shift. My background is like almost 30 years in VFX. I was a compositor way back. I was a flame artist, so I started on flame. Rhythm and hues, I really learned the appreciation for like the math of color. And
these are some massive companies.
I mean, Rhythm and Hues, we had like 6,000 employees worldwide. We were like big VFX. We did Life of Pi, Babe, Pig in the City, Chronicles of Narnia. And then when I went to Logan, which is a really well-known design commercial house, I built our color pipeline. And there I really started focusing just on color more and more on like heavy VFX color. And then I got the opportunity to come work with Mark. So come on in, this is stage A.
Ooh. Hello.
I am a stage A.
Oh my God, it's like instantly the sound just dies in here. I feel like I just entered a vacuum.
We don't call it death, we just call it immortality as we move sound into the ether of enjoyment.
So this is Mark Minder. Marky.
Hey, how's it going?
Place.
Hey,
Nice to meet you.
So I just want to go and just start like moving stuff around.
The first Atmos stage to be built from the ground up.
He can actually take sound and position it right here or right there or up here.
These are every speaker in the house. Power of this menagerie is, you know, look, we just finished a film called The Gray Man. Just to give you an equivalent of how many tracks we had rolling on that, a little under 4,000.
Wow.
So
when you're watching in here, this is full theater. Like so this is what it's gonna be. So sometimes I'll set up my color panel right here and we'll grade in here. This is the first time in one of your videos that Bill is actually full on nerded out.
I know, right?
I'm in my happy place.
I can see that.
Aren't these just pianos? And then
whoa, look at this VCR. Look at this. This looks like a spaceship.
To me, this is like...
That's Star Trek right here.
You've sunk my battleship.
All right, so in this scene, I'm gonna be telling you a little bit about our sponsor, Intel and Asus, and this super fancy laptop right here. But then we're gonna go ahead and edit this together so we can see what a slightly more multicam setup looks like to edit on Resolve. And I'm also wearing two different microphones. One's a backup, you know, with lavs. Sometimes you just get some microphone sound in one, so you gotta be able to switch to the other. Now, look at this. Can we just appreciate this monitor right here? Pops up as you open. I mean, it's pretty useful because Resolve really likes to be in full screen as you're cutting, and you still have access to listening to your music library down here and my notes. Also, all of it is touchscreen, which is nice and convenient. So even when you're editing at an awesome coffee shop like this one, Distrito Coffee, it's opening soon, really soon. We'll keep you posted. I'm excited to show you the place when we're ready. And this OLED display right here covers 100% of the P3 DCI color gamut. 100% DCI P3 color gamut. You guys know what I mean. This display can show you a bunch of colors. This thing even has a little sensor in here that makes sure that your white balance on your screen or your color temp is accurate based on your environment. Also compatible with the Asus Pen 2.0, which has 4,096 pressure points. So if I was an artist, I'd make some beautiful work of art here. But my handwriting looks like a second grader that was a doctor in second grade. That doesn't make any sense. How do you think I am at these sponsorships? I don't know. You're usually the ones doing them.
I don't hear the oomph in your voice when you're talking. You gotta be like, ugh.
A little bit more massive. Zenbook Duo. How's that?
Something along those lines. First try, it's not bad.
And when it comes to video editing, it's one of those things that really utilizes every bit of performance that a computer can give you in terms of speed and speed. So this can be spec'd out with a Intel i9 H series processor, 32 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM. I always try to edit off the internal SSD of a laptop if I can, so you can upgrade this up to 2 terabytes. And Resolve does utilize the GPU quite a bit, so it's awesome that we can configure this with GeForce RTX 3050 Ti. Back here we have a micro SD card reader, full-size HDMI for your external displays, and a power adapter right here to charge up your 76 watt-hour battery. But then we have Thunderbolt 4s back here. Now, Thunderbolt 4s are nice because they basically are guaranteeing you a certain amount of speed, so 32 gigabit per second minimum, because video, we are always moving a ton of huge, massive files around, so we need transfer speed. Thunderbolt 3's minimum requirement was 16 gigabits per second, I believe. So, I mean, they both say 40, so it kind of sounds the same, but really, before the minimum was 16 gigabit, now it's 32, so you're probably faster. Also, these can hook up to 2 4K display or 1 8K display, so that's all part of what comes with Thunderbolt 4, and you can use it to charge. Thank you so much to Asus for sponsoring this episode, supporting this channel, and all that fun shit. Links to this laptop down there in the description. Clickety click click. Now let's go ahead and download all this media onto this computer and cut the scene. So here we are again back in the project manager, and cloud collaboration is probably one of the things I'm most impressed about when it comes to Resolve. I'm not gonna open it up because we're working on a bunch of projects that are under NDA, top secret stuff. I'm like a secret agent kinda. What? I'm basically the same thing. I'm working on top secret projects all the time. I'm James Bond. We can all access the same project kind of at the same time and do pretty much live updates.
So again, it's like Google Docs where you can work on something at the same time.
DaVinci Resolve is basically Google Docs. By the way, Resolve is free. If you want Resolve Studio, which gives you access to slightly more features and capability, that does require a purchase. But there's a lot of things that give you a license along with a product. For example, any of their cameras, if you buy this keyboard or this super awesome.
Right, because that's how you justified that purchase, right?
Yeah. But the cloud collaboration I'm paying $5 a month for to allow us to store the project on the server. Again, the project is not any of the footage. So I put all my media on Dropbox, but the project's right here.
Well, that's a small price to pay for convenience.
We have 4 pieces of media. Our A cam angle, our B cam angle.
Whoa, that's the crotch angle?
No, it's the close-up of the laptop. You just caught it at a bad time. Our music track, and then screen capture, which I just basically did the website, and we're gonna use this as B-roll. All right, so what are the 2 things that you need to know before you get a project started?
Resolution and frame rate.
Down here, we're also gonna set proxies now, so you can adjust how high quality you want your proxies or codecs to be. I like something really small in file sizes so that I can get it up to Dropbox so everyone can access it as fast as possible. But you may want to adjust this depending on what you want the proxies for. Some people do it because they're dealing with these massive raw codecs and they just want to compress it down to something that's easier on their system. So after you set those, the only other thing you got to do is set your proxy generation location. So where on the drive do you want it to go? And I always put that to Dropbox so it auto starts uploading and then it links up with everybody else. And the other thing we're going to do is color management. So we're going to go ahead and switch this to YRGB color managed. Since we set it to color managed, it's going to make it very easy to work with log formats like this. See how the colors are really flat and lame. So we're going to take both of these, and since we set it to color managed, this option should pop up, which is input color space. And we shot this in a format called S-Gamma3 Cine and S-Log3.
What is the purpose of this color space thing that we're doing right now?
Okay, so if I undo that, this is how the camera shoots it. But log is designed to maintain information. It's not designed to look good. I mean, there's a lot to talk about just in color, so we'll have to make that a separate video with Eric at some point. Let me know in the comments if that's something you guys want to see. But now everything looks proper. It's been converted to Rec 709. Basically, it just looks colorful and vibrant and nice now. And at this point, I might as well start rendering proxy so this footage will start getting uploaded to Dropbox. And since we set those parameters earlier, all I got to do is highlight it, right click, and generate proxy media. And it's going to basically convert everything to the format we want and put it in the Dropbox folder, and Dropbox automatically starts uploading it. And then Dylan can access this project from the cloud and start working on it with Proxies. Now, one of the things I did was record with 2 wireless microphones. That gets recorded into the camera, and one microphone goes into the left channel, the other one goes to the right channel. So if I just drag and drop it in, my left ear is gonna be one mic and the right ear is gonna be the other mic, which is not necessarily what I want because it could kind of be weird, and one's really just a backup. Usually you want to select one microphone, be like, play this through both ears. So see this right here, it says 2.0. If I go over, it says stereo. Stereo is 2, a left and right track. But I can basically right click, change track type to mono, and now it's just 1 track. But then I have 2 tracks, right? So we're gonna go here to the A cam where the audio was. I'm gonna go to clip attributes, and I'm gonna go to audio. So see this right here, we have a stereo channel, and then we have a channel 1 and a channel 2, right? But what I wanna do is go to mono, and I get to decide which one do I want that to be. Well, let's make this one number 1. And then what we're gonna do is add another channel that is mono, right? So I want mono, track, add 1 more. And then this is basically gonna be a mirror of that, which I don't want. I want the second one. So now I have 2 separate mono tracks, each one targeted to each different part of the track. Hit OK. And now watch this. If I import it this way, it's the same clip as before, but now I've got 2 separate channels, and these should both be mono now. So I can go ahead and delete this. And then if we take a closer look, check it out. These are 2 different microphones. And here I scratched one of my microphones, so you could hear it on one channel and not the other. And based on that, I can do a bunch of different things, from just completely deleting the track, or I could go ahead and hit this M, which is mute track. So now basically it's just gonna ignore this track and only use this. Or I can go here and hit solo, which means I'm only listening to this. That's the same thing.
It seems like that would also be helpful if there was 2 people. Like if we were talking and then I cleared my throat while you were talking, it would be nice to kind of cut that part out.
Exactly. So if I wanted to mute this from here to here, I could do that. And this little tab appears. This is basically like a crossfade in and out, so you're not having hard audio cuts. You never want to suddenly cut audio, or else it sounds weird. Another way you could do that is also just hitting those keyframes with the Alt and then doing that. I mean, again, there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing. Hey, quick interruption. So one of the things I'm not a huge fan of is if you change clip attributes like we just did with the audio tracks and work with proxies at the same time, they tend to clash with each other a bit. I think the problem is if you make adjustments in the clip attributes and then generate the proxies afterwards, all those changes you did in clip attributes gets baked into the proxy files themselves. So the proxy files are different. So one of the things I like to do sometimes is if I have 60p footage coming in, I like to convert that over to 24 frames per second so that it's nice slow motion. But the problem with that is that if I try to relink the proxies, a lot of times Resolve will be like, no, this is 60p footage. We're looking for 24 frames per second proxies. So it doesn't relink. But then if you do things in the clip attributes like frame rate or image flip or maybe pixel aspect ratio for anamorphic, you do that and then generate the proxies afterwards, then that will actually translate over to the proxies, so those will link. But just to make things a little bit more confusing, when you do the clip attribute adjustments to the audio track like we just did, that is something that is better to do after you generate the proxies. At least that's how it's been for me, at least. Otherwise I get just a blank channel 2. That is definitely something I would like to see streamline a little bit in a future update, or maybe I'm just doing something wrong. I don't know. I'm crazy. Don't listen to me. And like you always say, organize is nice.
Yeah.
So whenever you expand out a track like this, you see how the names pop up. You can go ahead and label these. So let's go ahead and say Lav 1.
That's not what I was gonna put.
What were you gonna put?
I was gonna put Jean's belly button and Jean's nipple.
Now we have our B cam here, and I usually try to give each microphone or separate source its own track, so just to keep it separate. And you notice it kind of made a gap right here, so this is an empty video track. You can always right click and go delete empty tracks, and it'll just clean that right up for you. And basically now what we want to do is sync these 2 cameras up. So you can line them up with a clap, which I usually do for backup, but auto align clips based off of waveforms. So waveforms like the sound waveforms. It's going to listen to both of these cameras and go, I think this is generally where they line up. So then taking a closer look, you can see that it is definitely lined up. This is a quiet track. Now this is just a scratch track. So I'm just literally using it just to sync, right? So now that it's synced, I honestly don't even need this track anymore. So I might as well just freaking delete it.
And that was the audio from the B camera.
Exactly. Now that these are synced, I'll go ahead and just highlight it all and just do link clips just like that. So now, as long as this linked selection is selected, I move it and they all move together. If I do the blade tool and cut it right there, it's gonna give you a nice clean cut across all of them. Whenever you sync a bunch of layers like this, there's always just like little extra, just, you know, between the time you started recording one camera to the other. So I like to just trim the hedges. By the way, this is just like my workflow. It might not be the right workflow. It's just like how I like to do it. It gives me quite a bit of control and flexibility. But you know, you could also like select the two cameras. You could do create new multicam sequence, and then you could do the sync in with sound, make a multicam sequence, which I'll sometimes use if I'm using like a really complex project. But I have noticed that a lot of times it says, sorry, I couldn't sync these clips, when sometimes they sound very obviously similar. So yeah, if I've got a bunch of different cameras going, then I definitely try to go with timecode. So from here, we have these two cameras, and the way I like to do it, and again, this is just my method of doing it, is I like to take the B cam and I just like to shrink it down and put it in the corner, just like that. And I like to go back to linking mode and I just kind of cut it. And then of course, I've got a million different shortcuts that I like to use. You go in and out for this segment and do extract. You could do cuts, you could do trims. There's a trim tool right here. I mean, this video would be like 12 hours long if I went through all these tools. But basically, it's the same thing as you were doing earlier, but you know, it's just like figuring out how to do it with shortcuts.
Doing it Gene Bond, 00 potato.
00 potato. But if you want to learn this stuff more in depth, then definitely go to Resolve's website, hit training. We've got all the videos here free.
So I could have done this instead of
being tortured with me. Yes. So this is how I like to do a lot of my assembly. And a lot of times you could tell a lot by just looking at the audio waveform. So like obviously from here to here, I'm just kind of setting crap up. So I can just go ahead and trim that out. And I think the official way to do multicam is that multicam sequence thing where it shows you both screens. You can literally click back and forth between the different angles, which is useful. But the way I personally like to do it is going like, okay, this is the active track right here. It's on top, right? And then here I wanted to cut to this wide angle. So then I would go ahead and just disable that top layer. And then I would kind of just like make my shot selections like this.
So you don't have to delete, you can just disable.
Yeah, because sometimes I might want to bring it back, right? So I just like to disable and enable. I have that in a shortcut D, and it looks like that's actually the default shortcut. All right, so I've gone ahead and did my shot selection, right? But now whenever the B cam is here, it's still small. So I can just go ahead and highlight that, right click and remove attributes. And in this case, I want to basically reset the position and the zoom, or if you don't want to go look for the specifics, I can just hit Alt and just bam. So now we just end up with a B cam, A cam. And again, these are both mics on me, so it's not as important to switch back and forth. Usually I can probably just select one and I'm good there. But if I want to have more control over which mic is on at what points, I go through and just start disabling different tracks. One more thing I do like to do fairly early on is get music in here. So I'll go ahead and drop this down to the bottom right here. Now it automatically made this into a stereo track. That's great because music usually is stereo. I always like to bring in music as early as possible because I think of editing kind of like playing the piano. My mom's a piano teacher, by the way, and she used to always tell me, like, you can't just play the notes. You have to feel the music. If you don't feel the music, you're not actually playing the music, you're just hitting keys. So it's a very similar type of thing, and it helps to hear the music when you're cutting because then you feel the edit. Do I sound pretentious?
No.
You have to feel it. You have to bring your soul out and all that bullshit. No, but it does make a big difference when you hear music and you're cutting to it. It just like makes that pacing just feel right. But sometimes it's like another layer you have to think about as you're doing stuff and trimming stuff, right? Like if I want to do my W edit, then it's gonna mess with that and it kind of gets in the way. So what I like to do is just get the audio levels roughly to where I want it and just lock it in place right there. And as long as it's locked, I can just go ahead and do all these edits and I don't have to worry about it accidentally messing up with this track. And let's start putting in B-roll. So I always like to go into dual viewer mode for this because this is the timeline here on the right and then this is the source viewer. So if I go here, this is the screen capture B-roll. So this part right here, I don't want this shot, so I'm going to come up with
B-roll. You don't
B-roll.
want the shot.
Yeah, so I'm going to put an I for in and I'm going to kind of scroll down a little bit and let's say out here. So I and O shortcut keys for that. All right, so now let me just go ahead and just kind of skim through, figure out what part I want the B-roll to start. So let's say I want to start right here on this slide in. So I put an endpoint there. Let me go ahead and drag this over and let's just say place on top. right? So basically it's going to place that on the very top of that in and out segment. It's going to fill it. But notice that it also brought in an audio track as well, because there is audio tied to this B-roll clip, but it's basically just scratch audio. So we're going to try it again. And this time we're going to select this, which is video only. Or if you needed audio only, you can just drag that over. But we're going to do video only. And again, place on top, but there's all these other options if you prefer, but place on top just so it sits right there on top and that B-roll clip is in. Now notice that you can still see a little bit of the footage behind it, and that's because the aspect ratio of the screen capture is a little bit off. All right, so you could go in here and zoom it in to fill it in, or you can make it smaller, put a black background in or whatever. But one of the things that's kind of nice is that if you go into your timeline and you go into your settings, you have a few options on how new footage gets scaled if the aspect ratio doesn't perfectly fit, right? So I'm gonna uncheck that so I can have more custom control. And this says scale entire image to fit. It basically took the edges of the left and right and filled the screen, but that left us a gap right there, right? But the other option is scale full frame with crop. So let's say I change it to that. Look, it scaled it, but it cropped out the left and right, but it filled the frame. And you know, this is gonna be useful if you have a bunch of different aspect ratios.
You unchecked project settings. Be careful with that, because once you've unchecked that, that timeline now becomes its own little mini project with its own settings, including output monitoring. So for most of us, the way that we change that is actually on a global level. So if you go down to your little gear, change that here in the image scaling tab. So that's doing the same thing, but doing it globally to all of your timelines. The other place you can do it as well is like you can select a bunch of clips, come over here to retime and scaling, and you have the same option here. So project scaling, we can follow the project settings, which you've set up, or we could crop it, fit it, stretch it, fill it. Anyway, I thought that might help.
There's a lot of small customizable things that you can do with the footage that I didn't know you could do.
And this is just the edit tab. All right, now Molly went on to the color tab.
I'm gone, I'm out.
Carrie has pretty much left the building at full speed. I didn't even know she could run that fast. Now, overall thoughts on Resolve. I'm a big fan of the software. I plan on continuing to use it for now, and I don't plan on using Premiere as of right now. But if there is one thing that is giving me a little bit of concern, it's that I've been having some glitches in the exports. So this video, for example, I initially rendered out this scene with a circular mask, but in the renders, it comes across as glitchy. I'm not sure why. With Premiere, over the hundreds of videos I've exported, I've never had issues, except for a few times where I found out that it was because of driver issues. Where in Resolve, the last video, even the FX30 video, I had some issues with the audio in one of the exports where a chunk of audio was just missing for whatever reason. Went back to the project to make sure nothing was wrong. Everything seemed fine, so I just re-exported it again, and it was fine. So that does make me feel like I have to check every render after I export to make sure everything's good. And in a long ass video like this, it really sucks when I go watch the whole thing and at the very end I realize there's a glitch. Eric says he rarely sees glitches and he pushes whole features through there. So it's most likely because I'm on a very, very new version of Resolve 18, and updates seem to be coming out very rapidly. And he also told me that at his post house, he runs a older version of Resolve. He never runs the latest version. So that's probably the smart thing to do. But overall, I'm going to continue trying it, and I'm really hoping that maybe within the next few versions of the release, I stop seeing issues with the renders. And if I continue to see these, I might be tempted to switch back. We'll see where it goes. Ultimately, I'm just going to go with whatever software gives me the least amount of headaches. That's it. Thanks for watching. Click on stuff, subscribe, and all that good stuff, and I'll talk to ya later.